Hi.
Hello, Aimee.
Hello, Bayo. Yes, thank you for being here.
It is my great pleasure to be with you, my dear sister.
Yeah. You as well. And you're at home in Nigeria now, right?
Yes, yes. 3 years ago, I saw my mother last in 2019, and I knew I had to come see her. I couldn't bear the thought of, you know, staying longer without seeing her. So I'm at home in my mother's house, very humble space. It's not built for Zoom conversations like I shared with you. It's built for food and lots of feeding. And I'm really feeding well with her mother's cooking. So I'm happy to be here. It's a bit clunky, the arrangement, but it's just right.
Yeah, I feel like that's even more appropriate for the occasion.
Yes, 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 indeed. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Wonderful. So where shall we begin? I know the, the part of the purpose of what we're here for is because you were going to be in person with us here
Yeah.
on the land for April 2nd. But unfortunately, you were unable to get the visa, which it sounds like that's a situation that many people are struggling with now. But
Right. It's not even a failure to get the visa. It's that the opportunity to apply is not even available.
yeah,
So yeah, it's all closed down now.
yeah. Well, here we are. This is wonderful too. And
Yeah.
I just want to open up the space between us as we've already, you and I have been conversing over this notion of sanctuary. And as you know,
Yeah.
a part of what I and we are doing here is building grief sanctuary here in New Mexico.
Right.
And,
Right.
yeah, just so others know who are watching, like you and I have been conversing over this for over a year now. And I think it
Yeah.
was February of, oh gosh, I'm really bad with linear time, 21.
Most of us are.
Yeah, that you suggested this notion of having a fundraiser or calling, having this more public gesture of sharing what it is we're dreaming up here and
Yes.
building. So I'd love to just dive in and talk about whatever comes around this notion. And if you want to ask me anything, or I don't know, just travel with me in this. Let's go.
Right. 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 Well, I'm grateful to be part of this initiative. It's I was thinking the other day about how tautological grief sanctuary is, right? Or poetic, if you will. Sanctuary is already a matter of grief and grieving, right? In the ways that I've come to understand it, um, that grief runs through. Um, but maybe the explicitation is beautiful because I think what it shares with me, especially this bold, courageous invitation to grieve together, is that forward movement, the continuity of the modern is no longer productive in the ways that might be life affirming, and that we're in trouble. And that saying we're in trouble is maybe the first step in this long journey that we need to take together. Admitting or thinking that we can hope our way through this, right, is problematically linked with the reinforcement of the colonial. So grieving is what we want to know how to do well. We want to know how to stay in sites that are open for this. And this is why this work is politically vibrant and densely important today. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel
What do you think?
Oh, I feel that so much. And I feel like a part of what you're speaking to pulls up in me is just something I hear and witness a lot in at least my surrounding and culture is just this association of grief being this negative thing or something
Yes, yes,
something to
yes.
fix and something to find a five-step method to get through and finish and control. And while grieving, like for me being in grief and in relationship with it, of course it's not, I'm not trying to glamorize it or
Mm-hmm.
um dismiss the pain of it or the experience of sometimes those awful terrible moments that you
Yeah,
have. And though it's never been a binary thing to me where it honestly the terror of it or the awful feeling that so many I feel in our culture are afraid of meeting, to me often that's the most alive point too. It's like I hear often
yeah,
in your language this how you speak to the cracks and how
yeah, yeah,
um, before I even knew what the heck I was writing and old songs I've written, there was just this notion of like when whatever's cracking and breaking open, that is this new, more vibe, this that is the aliveness and this like that love that's busting at the seams that
yeah,
I feel grief is a part of busting that seam open. So, or you
yeah,
could say, you know, the releasing of the levees or the dams of just, you know, what needs to move is finally moving. And um, so while again, this isn't trying to glamorize pain or grief, but
yeah.
it's more speaking to the multidimensionality of grief and how I feel it's the most direct way through um, and with life, you know.
Right, right, right. It's interesting that I find myself also saying this, saying what you said many times to punctuate your remarks. That this isn't trying to glamorize grief or pain. Sometimes we have to insert that to remind people that are listening to us or reading us that this isn't the other side of the coin. And that is very interesting because I believe that the modern presupposes that pain is either an ultimate evil or it's something potentially glamorized, right? It's either one or the other, right? There isn't another way of being accountable or responsible to pain as movement of bodies. There isn't another way to notice that loss is the mechanism of emergence,
Mm,
right? That to be alive is not to be contained. To be alive is to be crisscrossed and crossed out and pulled out in ecstasy from the static essential points that we've presumed that we occupy. So, it's very interesting, this idea. I hear, and it's, I say it too most of the time, like, hey guys, this is not, I'm not saying pain is good, right?
yeah.
But the idea here, and I think it's instructive to note the saying of that, is that it seems we are inhabited by this almost offensively binarizing mechanism that wants you to believe that if one is not then one thing, then it is the other thing,
Yeah.
but there's something that spills away about and grieving and pain and the things we would readily pathologize that is inviting us to do other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear you. And yeah, I think it was that sensing in and just even before I met and knew you, like I could sense that, like you felt that way in this conversation of pain and grief. And I think it's why I was curious to be like, oh my, we need to be in conversation and
Yeah,
exploring the doing of this and the place
yeah,
making of this, path making of this. And
yeah,
yeah, because
yeah.
I am already getting asked, and we're not even fully open or launched here as a grief sanctuary, but um, I'm asked often, is this like a retreat center or is it this or that? And honestly, maybe that word is just way overused these days for me because I don't see it as a
Mm-hmm.
retreat space. Um, and it's also not like a grief spa or like a place to just own, like, while rest is important and regulating and being, of course, I'm all about that, but this is a place to move with and be with,
Mm-hmm.
which nature is
Mm-hmm.
never static. It's always in motion and
Yeah, yeah,
moving. And I do feel the lack of motion, the lack of grieving is actually maybe what our culture calls depression or
yes.
whatever other
Mm,
pathologies. It's like grieving is actually an aliveness. And it's, again, it's not the other side of whatever the opposite of grieving is, like being
yeah,
happy all the time, like neither,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
um to me it's a very vibrant, like beautiful way to, and it's not a new concept, it's not even a concept, it's just it's most natural to us. So perhaps, I don't know, like I'm just, everything I feel we're in conversation over is so natural to our, just, at least for myself, like I'm just
Mm-hmm.
doing what feels true and natural. And it's actually taken me
Yeah,
a while getting through I'm 38, and I think we're like 3 days apart on the calendar.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Just we're siblings through and through, Amy. We're
Right.
both 38.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's taken me a bit to realize, like, oh my God, all those disturbances through my 20s and 30s are just, it was me trying to get back to often that child self in me that knew, like when I was a kid, I just cried out and, or I screamed when something felt wrong. And yeah, like sometimes it feels as simple as that, is like we're just getting back to what
Mm,
is most natural to us. So
right,
yeah.
right, right. I agree. I often think of grief as a potential displacing of the subject citizen. It's a displacement of some kind. Modernity thrives on placement, fixity, essentialisms, right? It wants to position bodies in categorical identitarian boxes. That's how it thrives,
Mhm.
right? It's not an evil thing or a bad thing. It's a way of forming the planet, but it has shadows. It has its own cyclic problems,
Yeah.
and 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 now we've run into the impasses of modern civilization because we've thrived, so to speak, by building ramparts and walls to guard against grief,
Mhm.
to guard against these errant migrant feelings, right? This is why philosophers, of my ilk would say that psychology is the policeman of capitalism,
Mm.
because what it does is to guard the borders of the self against rupture.
Mm.
So grief is potentially rupturing, right? It
Yeah.
displaces the essential staticity of the subject and invites movement. It invites a porosity that can be emancipatory, that could allow us to witness, voices that are not done with, things around us. It's a deep epistemology of the soul, where the soul is not something within us, but the soul is an ecology. And I think, this is how I see Únashay. right? This beautiful project, an invitation to research.
Yeah.
Research, yeah, it's like, let's eat up this surprise that we are imbricated and entangled, and we've never been modern or human. Let's eat up this surprise together as in grief. Let grief be part of the dish that we eat up, and maybe something might meet us in the middle there. It's vitally important work.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel that, brother. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm. And
I was also thinking about the um, the notions of healing that we are fixated upon, healing as continuity. And I heard that, when you're reporting, that some people ask, is this a retreat center? Is this a place, I just wrote about it just before coming on this call. This this idea of continuity or an additive politics, it just adds to what we already know. So it's basically people in the West or in a German magazine asking me in an interview, for instance, what do we need to add to our climate response machine so that we can do better, right? It's always something cumulative, and accumulation is not disruptive, right? It just adds to what we already know, and hopefully in the by and by, the modern hopes it would have accommodated the indigenous and come up with a full archive of an answer. But grief resists that. Grief is not even a human feeling. It's an ecological resistance of coloniality. It's like, nope, you will not figure this out finally. You will be composted. And somewhere in the composting, you might meet the others that you need to work with.
Yeah, I feel that so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it feels important to also speak to, I guess, a bit of my own path that led me here was rupture. And
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I speak to my own ruptures, not just to share and just share a bit more of my own path, but also to just or mirror back and remember, like, we all have ruptures. That too is a part of nature and life. And there was, I mean, a part of what led me out here to the desert where I live, which was around 5.5 years ago, was my mother passed away suddenly. I kind of like, she had terminal cancer, but seemed to be doing well. And then, yeah, I'll try to give the short version of it. She just had an accident in the kitchen, and that she choked, and it threw her into cardiac arrest. And so I'm an only child, and like me and my father and my mom has two sisters, and we all thought she was doing quite well on her treatments, and then just randomly had this accident in the kitchen where it's just amazing. You think, the story's going to be one way, and then this random accident happens. And I was on tour in Mexico City at that time and got the phone call. And I think, yeah, I'm sharing this just to maybe speak to those complete ruptures and devastations of heart that I know was so, even though I didn't conceptually understand often, like, what it was, almost like my body and my soul had to start like building sanctuary, because it was my way of moving with that devastation. And then within a year, or around a year after she passed, I lost my dearest friend to an OD. And he was like my mother's second child, and dear soul friend of 22 years. And I think yeah, why I feel the need to speak to this is it feels so important to um, kind of go not against the grain of our culture, but just to actually
Mhm,
embrace the rupture. And
mhm, mhm,
um, I just I read something very brief that one of my favorite authors, Lydia Yuknovich, just wrote about like a woman in her community just lost her child very suddenly, and Lydia just said, when devastations of the heart happen, at least we can provide communities of care. And sometimes it's as simple as that too. Is like, and that's a part of um, almost what has been again like it's something my body knew far sooner than my mind knew, is just there need to be other ways of holding people when their lives have just been ripped open, and
mhm.
whatever level of devastation has occurred. And we all know in our own different, whether personal or collective ways, like so much is being ripped open around us. And instead of, as you've said, you've spoken to this like linear way of just mulling through the problems and fixing everything, I think we need to get more creative with how we are with the ruptures. And um, this is just one experiment among many. What we're doing here is just, how would it look if we did create a community of care here that in all these different varying ways supported people whose lives have just been ripped open. Or yeah, it doesn't, I'm not saying it's just that, but i I did feel the need to speak to that a bit,
Mhm, mhm,
because that was a
mhm.
part of my madness and my disturbance when I went through my losses. Is like everybody either wanted to fix me or over
Yeah,
spiritualize it, or I don't know, just like
yeah, yeah,
give me some spiritual platitudes. And um,
yeah,
it was very lonely and isolating. And um, I just know there's so many other creative ways we can meet that.
yeah, yeah. No,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. That was, yeah, that is the, in many senses, the heart of this vocation and this creative venture into decolonial wilds is these unfortunate losses that you, my dear sister, have experienced, but also the way you're being invited to weave that into abundance of some kind, so
Mm.
that the your tears have libated grounds for growth
Uh,
that people will eventually feed on, so to speak. Um, and I agree with you with this idea of communities of care. I think that would inspire me to say that, I don't even see grieving as, like I said, I think I've mentioned this, that I don't see it as a human event, like just bawling or
yeah.
shedding tears is not what I think I would refer to as grieving,
Mm.
right? Or else you could actually imagine a scenario in a Kafkaesque bureaucratic dystopia where the modern concrete technocratic world would assign spaces for you to grieve and get it over with.
Mm.
I'm sure that that's already what the world is like. We don't need to go into sci-fi to imagine that, right? It would
Yeah.
assign you a space and a time, do your business and get back to work,
Right.
right? Do your business and get back to work. So I don't think that is, I mean, when I think of grieving, I think of a public event that ripples, that envelopes, the human, but exceeds the human
Yeah.
and ripples across, space time. I
Mm.
think about some of the practices within my culture where, you know, the market people would come to a death. And even if they don't know the person, they would roll on the ground. And I wonder if that prostrating of oneself to the ground wasn't already a technology of meeting something that was only hinted at in the moment of crying. That it almost feels like what I witnessed some Indians do when my wife and my daughter caught chicken pox. Was it smallpox? I can't remember which of the poxes, but people came to our homes and they said, give us some.
Yeah.
They said, give us some. And they rubbed their hands on my, and I was like they were wanting to be infected.
Yeah, wow. You there, Bayo?
Nothing sterile or clinical here. Did I freeze for a moment?
You froze for a moment, but we're back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was saying that that the act of rubbing one's hand on someone infected was an invitation to the goddess, right? A goddess whose arrival was already an act of care and also an act of harm. The two cannot be separated, right? So I think grief is like an epidemiological event, right? It's almost entrepreneurial, right? It's like a massive rippling force has just exploded in space-time, and it will spread this infection of porosity.
Wow.
Who can we get infected? Who can we infect, and who do we, right? It's never a private thing. You share it, and it's like a moment when things get softer and tender so that other things can happen.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you're reminding me of just a very visceral memory and feeling of just how it felt to sing. Like when I learned to sing as a child and always hearing my mother sing, she is who taught me. I don't know, it kind of feels like there's not much of a difference between when we sing together and when we grieve together, or just this, when you're feeling this, whatever, the movement of a song in you, it does move you to sing too. And it makes me wonder how much different is that. And singing was often my first, like, it in some ways it was more of a language to me than speaking. I've always felt pretty insecure with speaking. And I think maybe singing was more natural because, again, so much of it, I wasn't conscious of it at the time, but I think I was able to grieve like it was like grief unleashing, but also praise unleashing and love unleashing, you know? And to me, I don't feel much of a difference between that sense that I had as a young person and I think our conversation here around this notion of just letting it move and you know, it's something we are a part of, and there's it's not something to master or get over, but it's actually here to unleash something that's so much more than what our brains or human technologies can get through. So
yes, it's unlearning mastery. It is what it is. It's unlearning mastery. And I love the juxtaposition of song with grief. That's so beautiful. Just like dreaming is not yours. Like there are specific cultures, right, where dream sharing already presupposes that the dream that came to you the night before belongs to us, right? It's for the community. It's not yours privately. And I think if we saw grieving that way as a relational murmuration of possibilities that tenderizes bodies in its path to becoming something else, then we might be like those Indian women that came to my home to ask for an infection.
I love that. It reminds me of keening. Are you familiar with that term?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes, I
I
am.
mean,
I
they're
am.
different, but just that notion of how fascinating it is that these people in past generations and other cultures, they actually hire people to show up and wail
Yes,
for the,
yes, yes,
and to pull it up, because that's
yes,
often, I guess, I don't know what you call it, just apparently our culture struggles with that, with pulling it up. So yeah, that could be a whole other conversation, but um, I find that fascinating, though, that there have actually, there are people with jobs that do that for a living. And
Interesting notion. Interesting to really consider and stay with that,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Maybe work like that will become more possible, and the Únashay Center is potentially, you know, more like, I dare say one of the arrowheads in this movement of possibility in the shifting of conditions that might make it possible for us in the near future to speak about grief, um, grief, what, grief midwives or something. And maybe there are things like that in the West already. We don't have names for that here in Africa because it's just embedded in the everyday. So there isn't there isn't a way to notice it. We grieve together. That's it. And then we eat and we dance, right? Because the rupture never stays still.
hmm
But yes, it is potentially emancipatory, and it is definitely more than human.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So what are you looking forward to as this beautiful day to come, at least from our temporal perspective here, but not from the perspective of those listening to us? What are you hoping that it might do,
Mm,
and and what what are you hoping to see happen in
yeah.
you?
Um, I'm hoping to, I mean, it's quite simple. It's just I'm hoping to see more of us come together. And um, I think a part of my own rupture that I was speaking to earlier was it it just led me into the doing, even though I didn't know where the doing was leading to. And I'm a part of why I've called this whole day an occasion, and I've wanted to meet and build a collaboration and a friendship with you and all, like, is I just want us to get dirt, like just to get our fingers in the dirt and do it. And
Yeah,
um
yeah,
so out of this I want to explore the true being and doing of this, or becoming and doing of this. And um of course, yes, we do need financial resource right now to finish some of the
yes,
spaces that we started, and we haven't been able to pay for the rest. So, and a
yeah,
part of what I dream is that, because there's two homes up on the hill back behind my little house, and I want to see people living in there for either very affordable or free, like for basically free residencies, that people who are going through varying experiences of grief, it does not have to be just death related. It could be, as you and I are saying, it's so layered and multidimensional. Artists,
yeah, yeah,
artists
yeah,
too. Like artists are often, you know, the one, like they too are always. I mean, I believe we're all artists in different ways, but we're always in those liminal realms. So I'd love to host artists and musicians and um, anyone really that wants to travel with this with us,
Mhm.
and to make it to really match these spaces with who needs it most in our communities.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
so we're trying to get creative with pulling together resource, both with financial resource and um, inviting people to share their skills with us for building. Yeah, like just
Yeah.
basically inviting all hands on deck right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I would like to, my dear sister, if I can just direct my voice to those listening to us, and to, I will, I will share a brief story and then an invitation. I think I've shared this story in context before. Maybe you were there to listen to it, but it's a story I wrote that comes from my embeddedness, my nestedness in and within my culture. Um, it's a story of a father about to die in the village, some village here in Nigeria. I can say here in Nigeria because I'm in Nigeria, of course. Um, he's about to die, and he calls for his son in the city to come and do the right things, to go through the rites of passage, everything that has to do with the father's burial. His son leaves his important job in the village, and the father said, so what we're going to do together is we're going to build a house. Okay, just one last hurrah, something between you and me, father and son and father. And so they start with their bare hands, digging in the soil, gathering leaves, to build a mud house. And it takes weeks, a few months to build up a structure, to put the thatched roof in place, to smoothen out the creases, to sweep the ground. It's almost set. By this time, the father is, just perched on the brink of the elsewhere, and his son is wrapping up the business. And so he comes to his father at the end of the line and says, basically, it's done. We did it together. And that's a really powerful moment between them. And the father said, did you sweep the ground? He said, yes. Did you clear this? Yeah. Did you make room for the chicken? Yes. Did you do that? Yes, 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 yes. Everything's done. And the father said, not quite. And with one last ounce of strength, alien almost, he jumps out of his deathbed, drags out a big hammer from beneath his bed, and walks to the place where the new house stands. And with one giant heave, swings the hammer and breaks a part of the wall of the house. And the son is, it's unspeakable for a child to be angry with a parent here in Africa. But the child is livid. Why did you do that? We spent months doing this, and you're about to die. This is not something I expected you to do. Angry as we would probably all be. And the father said the house wasn't complete until it was broken. That right now that it's open in this way, somebody will pass down the road, and this person will ask, what happened here? And inquire. And you will offer this person a cup of tea or some palm wine, and you will introduce yourself to this person. And this person will introduce himself to you. And then another person will come and also inquire and say, I don't know what happened here. Is there any trouble? And both of you introduce yourselves to that person. And that is how community will form, because we're never whole until something is broken. Hello, Amy?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. It froze
No,
for
it's
a
okay.
second, but I was with you.
It's part of the whole arrangement. Glitches are welcome. Glitches, it came
Yeah,
at the right point to talk about the glitch
yeah, right.
in
It
the
was
in the pure archive of completeness, right?
right.
And I think really in some never final analysis, Sanctuary is the invitation to incompleteness. It's the idea, and I know incompleteness is almost always heard as pathology, right? In most spaces, it's the idea that we need to be whole and complete. We need to die empty, done with all our potential, all our gifts to the world dissipated from our flesh. I think otherwise. I think of the gift of being broken open. And grief, this is where it figures. Sanctuary is the politics of revamping enlightenment, right? The enlightenment politics that informs our time needs a politics of falling to the earth. And I want to invite those of you who are listening to my dear sister Aimee and I in conversation, that these are the times when these awkward, perverse, almost fugitive arts and invitation to research with the otherwise are blossoming. Please give your energy and your blessings and your gifts to this beautiful eruption. Don't let this crack become a canyon. Don't let it be smoothed over by the highway. Let it blossom, let it grow and become something beautiful. And if it's beautiful for someone, it will probably reverberate and touch you where you are. Yeah, that's what I'll say.
Thank you so much. That's it. It's not smoothing over the cracks right now.
Yeah.
Time to go with them.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bayo. Yeah. This means so much to me, and I'm glad we're in this together. So.
Yes. Yes.
Great. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Aimee.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Have fun at Mom's.
I will.